Welcome to the debate. We are examining one of the most remarkable political achievements in recent American history, the election of Zahran Mamdani as the mayor of New York City. Mamdani is a Democratic Socialist, the city's first Muslim and South Asian mayor, and his victory occurred despite facing extraordinary, globally coordinated hostility and identity-based disinformation.
It really was a political victory achieved in the face of what can only be described as a democratic crisis, really.
Exactly. And this outcome forces us to confront a fundamental question about the current state of American politics. Does Mamdani's election primarily signify a fundamental political realignment and a powerful victory for progressive politics driven by sort of a new moral clarity? That is the argument I stand by. Or, as you suggest, does it primarily illustrate the severity, the depth, and the systemic nature of political polarization and entrenched bigotry in American public life, which, simply failed to stop this one candidate this time?
Well, I come at it from a different way. While we absolutely must celebrate the victory, I think the primary takeaway is the alarming, globally coordinated and institutionalized nature of the disinformation campaigns that were deployed against him. That infrastructure, that sheer level of attack, highlights a severe ongoing crisis that risks chilling democratic participation for really any successful minority candidate who follows.
I see why you think that. But let me give you a different perspective, one rooted firmly in the political outcome itself. Mamdani's win represents what I view as a profound realignment of the American political consciousness, what the source material calls a seismic shift. Crucially, he won not despite his moral clarity, particularly on global issues, but arguably because of it. This strategy successfully affirmed empathy as a legitimate and transformative political force, radically changing the political calculus that protects wealthy elites and oligarchic interests in the city.
I fully acknowledge the political triumph, and the coalition that delivered this win was impressive. But we cannot divorce the victory from the sheer scale of the coordinated war waged against it. I mean, we are discussing a candidate who is the subject of an absolutely massive, multifaceted disinformation campaign. The data is just staggering. Over 17.1 million posts circulated about Mamdani across platforms during the campaign cycle.
The numbers detailing the reach are indeed stark, yeah.
And let's look at the contents. This wasn't just, typical political mudslinging. The campaign endured over 1 million Islamophobic posts alone that reached over 150 billion users. This hate included terms like terrorist, jihadi, and Islamist. And furthermore, he endured extensive red baiting with over 1.43 million posts referring to him with communist or socialist slurs. This barrage, which included the use of vicious labels and maximalist accusations from figures across the political spectrum, it risks corroding democratic engagement regardless of the election's immediate result. That apparatus of hate, that's the systemic story that defines this moment for me.
I would argue, though, that if 150 billion impressions of hate speech failed to prevent the victory, aren't we actually discussing the failure of the disinformation machine to achieve its political objective, rather than its success at polarization? Let's maybe pivot to the core mechanism of the win, focusing on the electorate's actual choice versus this widespread hostility. My position is that Mamdani's method proves successful and provides a necessary model for progressive politics nationwide. His strategy involved deeply connecting democratic socialist economic policies like a universal rent freeze, expanding free childcare, making the city genuinely more affordable for working families with morally clear foreign policy stances.
That's an interesting point, suggesting the progressive platform kind of inoculated him against the hate.
I believe it did, yes. He essentially dared the establishment to focus on his identity. While he spoke about the material suffering of New Yorkers, he openly championed ceasefires, divestment, and dignity for Palestinians, even supporting BDS, which is the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, politically toxic for many mainstream politicians here in New York. Doing this in a city historically dominated by powerful pro-Israel lobbies is, as the source says, unheard of in modern history, and it still resulted in a victory. That means the electorate rejected politicians who just deliver platitudes and instead rewarded integrity on tough issues.
I agree that the success proves the electorate's capacity to look past the smears, but I worry that focusing solely on the victory minimizes the severity of the institutional hostility that tried to stop it. This wasn't just online commentary or, local smear campaigns. The material shows extreme multi-state institutional hostility, which indicates the rot in the system is deeper than the success of one local campaign can cure.
Can you elaborate on that institutional component a bit more?
While we are talking about 45 Republican elected officials and senior leaders from over 18 states circulating anti-Mamdani narratives. I mean, that's a nationally organized effort targeting a mayoral candidate. But more alarmingly, we saw an outright attempt to criminalize dissent using state power. A sitting member of Congress, Representative Andy Ogles, formally requested the Department of Justice to open an investigation into Mamdani's citizenship status and subject him to denaturalization proceedings.
An attempt to strip a U.S. citizen of his citizenship over political speech. That is... that's extraordinary.
Exactly. And this unprecedented step was predicated on protected speech, comments about a geopolitical issue, misrepresented through the use of rap lyrics. It's an extraordinary attempt to weaponize federal agencies against a political opponent based purely on their identity and dissent. The very fact that this attack was attempted, regardless of the election outcome, that is the defining feature of this political moment. It shows an alarming breakdown of democratic norms.
I find that framing problematic, though, because it suggests the system is terminally broken, whereas I see evidence of renewal. Let's look at a key demographic shift. Amid the specific attack against him for his stance on Palestine, the ground shifted locally. A poll found 43% of Jewish New Yorkers supported him, with support rising to 67% among voters under 44. This indicates a profound generational transformation away from single-issue pro-Israel politics within a crucial voting bloc. The political calculus changed. The integrity and political alignment proved stronger than the institutional attack you cite.
I acknowledge that generational shift, and it's certainly a necessary counter-narrative to the idea that New York is monolithic on this issue. But this leads us directly to the next point. When a local candidate takes such a morally clear stance, the hostility often becomes transnational, and the consequences are severe.
On the contrary, I think the win signals a new, maybe healthier reality for U.S.-India political engagement. The rise of Zahran Mamdani successfully fractured the perception of the Indian-American diaspora as a monolithic, politically centrist force that uncritically supports New Delhi. Mamdani, who is a very public critic of India's ruling party policies, including the Citizenship Amendment Act and their anti-discrimination laws, now forces New Delhi to contend with an influential U.S. political leader who actively critiques Indian government policy. This progressive voice from the diaspora challenges political narratives that solely court those aligned with the ruling party's cultural platform.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning, because the response from actors in India shows the dangerous dark side of transnational identity politics, how identity is weaponized to maintain control over diaspora dissent. We are seeing foreign actors actively interfering in a U.S. mayoral race, not just to influence, but to punish political thought.
You are referring to the comments made by Indian politicians?
Yes, look at the vicious rhetoric from India's ruling party. A BJP member of parliament, Kangana Ranaut, publicly questioned Mamdani's Hindu identity, called him Pakistani, and suggested his bloodline no longer exists, clearly trying to delegitimize him through nationalist exclusionary rhetoric that plays on dangerous historical tensions.
That is clearly vicious nationalist rhetoric. Yes, absolutely.
And it was quickly formalized into coordinated action intended to damage him personally and professionally. A coalition of 20 Hindu and Indian diaspora organizations issued an open letter calling on the U.S. State Department to revoke Mamdani's Overseas Citizen of India, or OCI card.
Right. For listeners who may not be familiar, that OCI card is essentially a lifelong visa for people of Indian origin, allowing them to visit, live, and work in India without constantly renewing visas.
Precisely. And revoking it means permanently banning his entry into India. This explicitly seeks to punish policy criticism across international borders by threatening to sever a diasporic New Yorker from his heritage, his family ties, his ability to engage with the land of his ancestors. This demonstrates weaponized nationalism, seeking to exert control over U.S. domestic political life. The fact that this apparatus exists and was activated proves that the threat isn't just about winning or losing an election. It's about the deep-seated effort to maintain ideological conformity across borders.
I would flip that, though. The fact that the progressive alignment is strong enough to provoke such an extreme, panicked, and global reaction is actually proof of its potency. That progressive voice from the diaspora succeeded despite this global pressure, indicating that the fracture you cite is now perhaps dominated by the progressive element. Let's look finally at the mechanics of the organizing effort. Mamdani's mobilization was successful, powered by a broad-based, multiracial, working-class coalition.
I don't dispute the success of the coalition itself, no.
The approach consciously rejected the center-left tendency of being merely not Trump. Instead, they took the fight directly to the right, showing that political integrity is an asset. He actively countered race baiting, even producing campaign ads in Arabic, and doubled down on his identity. This refreshing, bold rejection of fear, it resonated with voters. The grassroots power proved stronger than the organized hate campaign.
The problem is that the attacks were designed to delegitimize the grassroots movement itself, creating an atmosphere of fear that transcends the outcome. Mamdani was targeted with xenophobic rhetoric, portraying him as a foreign threat who exhibited ingratitude despite his U.S. citizenship.
That is, unfortunately, a standard political attack against immigrant candidates.
It is standard, perhaps, but the level of coordination and detail was not. His coalition, the organizations and individuals who stood with him, was mapped and targeted in external reports like the Canary Mission dossier, which falsely asserted that their goals included destroying empire and supporting terrorist groups. This raises serious concerns for the safety of those identified, particularly given the dark history of surveillance in New York City, like the NYPD's post-9/11 Muslim surveillance program.
So you were arguing that the systemic damage caused by the targeted harassment is the primary lesson here?
Exactly. The coordinated attacks were designed to dehumanize, intimidate, and diminish working-class, immigrant, and Muslim communities. While the candidate won, the message sent to the voters was designed to create an atmosphere of fear that fundamentally threatens election integrity and participation among minority communities. The focus shifts entirely from policy to personhood, aiming to make any Muslim candidate feel that maybe the only option for safety is to retreat into the shadows. That chilling effect, that is the lasting legacy of the campaign against him, regardless of the win.
Still, Mamdani's win, despite facing this massive, unprecedented political and media infrastructure, is a testament to the power of a determined progressive movement. It demonstrates that when a candidate champions both clear material solutions for the urban working class and moral clarity on global issues, they can achieve a transformative victory against both the extreme right and the centrist establishment. It proves that this specific political alignment is viable and potent, offering perhaps a new path forward for the Democratic Party.
That's a compelling argument for the success of the progressive alignment, I grant you. But ultimately, the sheer scale of the coordinated political and media apparatus deployed against him, which was national, bipartisan, and global, it just cannot be overlooked. While he did win, the profound lesson is the degree to which successful minority candidates face institutional and transnational threats that go far beyond standard policy disagreement, including attempts to strip their citizenship and global campaigns designed to fracture their very identity. This reveals a crisis in democratic norms that must be urgently addressed alongside celebrating the victory.
The material clearly shows a political moment defined by two powerful competing forces: a movement for progressive change succeeding against a globally networked response dedicated to weaponizing identity and fear. The material leaves us contemplating which force, the structural threat or the political success, holds the stronger lesson for the future of American politics.